Lexus GS of the third generation, 2005-2011 years of release. Good day. If you're wondering is it worth buying the third generation Lexus GS and what problems you may encounter during operation, then you're at the right place. So with regard to the state of the body, even now the situation has not fundamentally changed. Despite the thin layer of paint and varnish, it's not difficult to find a specimen that looks very attractive on the outside. Of course, it won't do without chips and small scratches. They can be found on the leading edge of the roof bonnet, around door handles, on door seals, but finding any serious foci of corrosion is hardly possible. An exception is cars recovered after an accident. Of course, small spots of rust can be under protective plastic parts and lockers, but when buying used cars they don't look that far. And the sellers, given the good demand for this model, are unlikely to agree to remove the protective plastic. With cars that have had time to participate even in minor accidents, things are more complicated. For example, even a slight blow to the rear wings ends in depressurization of the seams. This is where the corrosion process begins. Unfortunately, the Japanese protected numerous seams only with a layer of paint, which was clearly not enough. When inspecting the trunk, you should not be lazy and dismantle the rear panel trim. The design of the latter turned out to be not entirely successful, because of which the panel gradually begins to rust at the points of contact with plastic. Often very large foci of rust can be found under the rear bumper in places that are exposed to sand and stone flying from under the rear wheels. The windshield frames requires attention when viewed. Unfortunately, very often owners find the problem in this place too late, when the rust comes out from under the molding. Fortunately, on those Lexus GS that still have the original windshield, corrosion is minimal. The problem with the quickly overheating front optics of the Lexus GS has not been spared. In addition, the lens reflector burns out rather quickly, although the headlights themselves are very reliable. From time to time, the owners of the Japanese sedan complain about the plastic trim, which is located under the windshield. With age, it will probably require replacement, as well as the rear view mirrors. Less serious troubles include damage to the plastic anthers that protect the power unit and automatic transmission. There is no need to talk about any fatal consequences in this case, but driving with torn pieces of plastic is hardly pleasant. An audit of all plastic shields covering the bottom of the car should also be done for the operability of their drainage holes. The true age of the Lexus GS should be determined rather not by the state of the body, but by the state of the interior. By the mark of 200 to 150,000 kilometers, it will not longer be possible to hide the signs of aging with the help of inexpensive chemistry. High mileage will be given by sitting seats and peeling leather on the steering wheel and the worn floor covering. However, no one interferes with immediately buying a car to alter the worn-out elements and return the almost perfect appearance to the Lexus GS interior. A quality painting or a complete replacement of decorative linings on the thresholds will cost a little more. There are no big complaints about the Lexus GS climate system. Of course, it can malfunction, but most often the air conditioning compressor and the contaminated smoke sensor, which now and then turns on the recirculation mode, are to blame for this. As for the air conditioner compressor, because of its design, which assumes a small piston stroke even in the off state by a mileage of 170 to 100,000 kilometers, the Teflon coating of its driving disc is abraded naturally. As a result, the pistons in constant motion begin to wear out intensively. If the oil and freon level at the same time drops to a critically low mark, it will not longer be possible to do without scuffing the compressor liner. In addition, it's not uncommon for wedging drive disc and pistons to damage the release clutch. Often the control valve in the compressor fails, but since compressors with a permanent connection, most masters are considered non-repairable in most services, they will only offer its replacement. A regularly breaking rear curtain is another typical Lexus GS problem. The demand for used curtains is so great that it's difficult to find them during disassembly. As a rule, the cause of the malfunction lies in the gearbox of the drive. Otherwise, the Japanese sedan doesn't cause any problems. In comparison with German competitors, its design is quite simple, which has a positive effect on reliability. On the other hand, the same Lexus GS standard navigation system seems completely outdated today. There are few electrical problems, but it's worth remembering that the Japanese car is very sensitive to power surges. If the main voltage is insufficient, the powertrain control system will begin to malfunction. At the first unpleasant symptoms, you should immediately replace the relay regulator. On cars in which the engine compartment boot is damaged, the alternator quickly begins to malfunction. At the same time, the latter in ideal conditions will delight you with excellent reliability. Its service life often exceeds 300,000 kilometers. Other typical troubles include problems with ignition coils, which suffer from engine oil leaks and periodic errors in anti-lock braking system sensors. Anti-theft systems deserve special attention. The fact is that the standard system of hijackers doesn't particularly stop. And since the Lexus GS has always enjoyed increased interest in the latter, most owners wanted to additionally secure their car. New anti-theft systems were not always installed professionally, which is why they get buggy with age. In the overwhelming majority of cases, under the hood of the Lexus GS, there are GR series gasoline 6s. Cars with a 3-liter 3GR FSE engine, which depending on the market developed from 249 to 256 horsepower, are the most on sale. Instances with a 3.5-liter V6 2GR FSE series are a little less common. The same motor, by the way, was installed on the GS 450h hybrid modification. In order to find a sedan with the 8 volume of 4.3 liters of the 3UZ FE series, you will have to try. Relatively few such cars were sold. As for the most powerful 4.6-liter version, it's considered almost exclusive in our secondary market. Regardless of which power unit is installed under the hood, new owners should thoroughly inspect the cooling system immediately after purchase. The cooling radiator tends to leak at the bottom. Do not forget that radiators need to be cleaned at least once a season. A typical problem with all units of the GR family is an unreliable pipe that supplies oil to the cylinder head. The rubber insert in it quickly breaks, after which the engine begins to lose oil. Often this happens right on the move, after which it's no longer possible to save the motor from overhaul. However, it's highly likely that the previous owners have already replaced the old tube with an all-metal new sample. Often during a cold start, Lexus GS owners are faced with phase regulator knocks. In addition, errors in the phase control system often occur. With such symptoms, you have to change the camshafts, the springs and pushers. However, even after repairs, a knock on a cold one will again make itself felt after a run of 15–20,000 kilometers. Leaks of oil heat exchanger hoses are quite common on Lexus GS engines. There are enough claims to the pump which cannot boast of a large resource. Occasionally, Lexus GS owners are faced with floating turnovers. Fortunately, after replacing the throttle bodies, they usually disappear. Another weak point is the valve cover gasket, which begins to leak over time. If the gasket is not changed for a long time, the ignition modules will constantly be in the oil. As for the coils themselves, on cars manufactured before 2010, the manufacturer changed them for new ones within the framework of a revocable company. If this is not done on the selected instance, the coils should be replaced by yourself. The problem of the fifth cylinder is the phrase that is well known to all Lexus GS owners. The fact is that over time the compression in the fifth or second cylinder noticeably decreases, and if you use an endoscope, then in the same cylinder you can see seizures. In the worst case, if the oil appetite due to the defects that have appeared is too large, the case may end with a broken piston. Naturally, the manufacturer and the mechanics did their best to understand the cause of the trouble. It turned out that the primary sources of problems are the air filter box and the corrugation going to it. Not only do the box joints cannot boast of proper tightness, so the corrugation begins to crack over time. The result is logical. Too much dust begins to get into the power unit. The owners get out of this situation in different ways. Someone is trying to glue the box, someone is using a similar part from the Toyota Mark X model, someone is installing a zero filter. Another reason for the appearance of the problem of the fifth cylinder is the catalyst, which begins to dust as the mileage increases. Apparently, in the depth of the exhaust system, a so-called reverse flow is periodically formed, which primarily renders the fifth cylinder unusable. However, the deterioration of the condition of the remaining cylinders in this case is just a matter of time. Factors accompanying the appearance of problems with the fifth cylinder are considered to be the formation of cracks in the intake manifold made of plastic. The situation is aggravated by the fact that cracks are not easy to notice, which is why the motor can suck in dust for several years. Most often, microscopic cracks on the intake manifold appear after cleaning it from carbon deposits. Usually, cleaning has to be carried out every 50–60,000 kilometers. If you refuse to clean, the motor will gradually lose power. If the carbon layer turns out to be too large, sooner or later the piece that has fallen off will fall under the valves or into the cylinder. Lexus GS power units are not insured against oil appetite. There are several reasons for its occurrence: the notorious problem of the fifth cylinder and the banal caulking of the oil scrape rings and close to critical wear of the piston group. Usually the minimum oil consumption starts at a mileage of 150–160,000 kilometers, after which it begins to progress a little. Another thing is that now it's no longer necessary to count on such a mileage for used copies. If the odometer still bears such attractive numbers, then there is high probability that the mileage has already been adjusted. By a mileage of 250,000 kilometers, the compression in the fifth cylinder relative to the rest is noticeably reduced. If you choose the right oil, then it's quite possible to put up with it. It's another matter if the compression in the problem and the rest of the cylinders will differ 2.5 times. In this case, it will no longer be possible to postpone serious repairs for a long time. Not all workshops will undertake to restore the power units of the GR family. For the sleeve you will need high-quality equipment which is not available everywhere. In addition, with a mileage of 250–300,000 kilometers, almost all attachments will need to be replaced. And if in the western part of the country they are still trying to repair Lexus GS engines somehow, then in the eastern regions the failed units are banally replaced with new ones. Fortunately, it's not difficult to find a contract motor in good condition so far. At the same time, Lexus GS owners often purchase units from the Mark X model. Not only the engine is often bought, but also the attachment paired with a gearbox. If you can find a Lexus GS with a 4.3-liter 3UZ FE family, then this option is definitely worth getting to know better. This power unit turned out to be very reliable and technically simple. Operating experience on other models has shown that the 4.3-liter G8 may well serve about 1 million kilometers before overhaul. Of course, with a mileage of 400–500,000 kilometers, you will probably need to replace the rings and the cylinder head, but even despite this, the reliability can be called outstanding. The resource of the 4.6-liter G8 1UR FE series is noticeably less, so you shouldn't specifically look for such a version. In addition, you should be prepared in advance that the maintenance of a powerful 8-cylinder engine will not be cheap. All-wheel drive versions of the Lexus GS are very rare. As for the gearboxes, there is no alternative to automatic at all. The basic version of the GS300 relies on a 6-speed ICIN gearbox. The box is initially not bad, but it's designed for a torque of no more than 320 Nm. And since the torque of the 3-liter petrol engine is 314 Nm, the box constantly has to work to its limit. The motors of the GS350 and GS430 versions are equipped with an automatic transmission designed for a torque of up to 420 Nm, but in this case with a 4.3-liter unit, the torque of which is 417 Nm, the automatic has to work not to the limit of its capabilities. Only after the update on the GS430 modification, they began to install an 8-speed automatic designed for a torque of up to 600 Nm. Unfortunately, Lexus GS transmission problems are not uncommon. The resource of the cardan shaft on modifications with engines of 3.5 and 4.3 liters in rare cases exceeds 200,000 kilometers, and the cardan shaft serves even less of those who enjoy active driving. The sedan with the 3-liter 6 also has enough mechanical problems. The weak point in all-wheel drive vehicles is the front axle drives. The rear gearbox also adds problems, the repair of which will cost more than 100,000 rubles. So even minimal oil leaks and barely broken bushings should never be ignored. The box, which is paired with a 3-liter engine, is considered quite reliable, but it's extremely sensitive to dynamic driving. At the same time, the electronics do not save the box in any way, rather the opposite. The engineers tuned it in such a way that the automatic could maximize the capabilities of the motor. As a result, on the GS300 version, the automatic transmission gets tired by the 150,000 km mark. With a mileage of 250,000 km, even the most calm drivers will not be able to avoid minor repairs. Those who like to ignite should be prepared for critical wear of the torque converter lockup lining already with a mileage of 150,000 km. Due to the constant aggressive driving, the front planetary gear bushing brakes, after which the transmission begins to operate with a characteristic trolleybus sound. Liner solenoids withstand on average from 150 to 200,000 km, and this is taken into account the observance of the service regulations. If the oil in the box is changed less often than it should be, by the same 150,000 km, it will be necessary to replace not only the valve body but also the seals of the box together with the oil pump. In no case should we forget about the fact that the heat exchanger which the engineers installed instead of the radiator is gradually clogged with dirt and ceases to perform its work effectively. Boxes then work in tandem with 3.5 and 4.3 liter engines are considered more robust. You cannot be afraid of problems with planetary gears up to a mileage of 350–400,000 kilometers. As for the resource of the valve body and the torque converter lockup linings, with active driving it will hardly exceed 200,000 kilometers. For neat drivers, similar problems will begin later, usually after a run of 250,000 kilometers. The main thing is to monitor the purity of the oil and in no case overheat it. As for the ATE box, which is installed on the Lexus GS 460, the situation is not clear yet. Due to the fact that the most powerful modification of the Japanese sedan has not received wide distribution, there are still no extensive statistics of breakdowns. We can definitely say that the early versions of the ATE box had a small solenoid resource, but this shortcoming was quickly eliminated. On more recent cars, the automatic confidently withstands 200–150,000 kilometers. But then you will not be able to avoid a series of small repairs, or, if you drive actively, major repairs will no longer work. Suspension is the strong point of the Lexus GS. If you try then on the secondary market, you can find copies with original consumables. With careful driving, many of them can serve up to 200,000 kilometers. Although the stabilizer struts and the rear lower arm bushing will certainly give up sooner. Shock absorbers serve about 150,000 kilometers on the Japanese sedan. Wheel bearings withstand the same, but only if the original wheels are installed on the car. But even with large 18th wheels, wheel bearings can withstand at least 80,000 kilometers. The electric power steering is reliable. Only after 200,000 kilometers its torque sensor can fail. There are more problems with the steering rack, largely due to the rigid side bushings of the rack, which begin to knock even with the minimal wear. With long runs, the rail begins to wedge. Most often the reason lies in the ingress of dirt into the recirculating balls. Fortunately, the bulkhead of the mechanism is not difficult. In parallel, it doesn't hurt to assess the condition of the roller bearing. There are no complaints about the Lexus GS braking system. Before a run of 200–150,000 kilometers, unscheduled work on it is not expected. As for routine maintenance, the front pads have to be changed every 30–50,000 kilometers on average. The brake disc replacement interval is from 60–100,000 kilometers. Periodically, you will have to carry out preventive maintenance of the calipers. This is especially true for the rear calipers, which tend to sour. The front calipers require less attention, but for their greater safety it's better not to drive through deep mud puddles. Otherwise, dirt will penetrate between the caliper cylinders, after which the brakes will begin to creak. In the worst case, ignoring the problem can result in damaged anthers. The third generation Lexus GS is considered very reliable and hassle-free, but this statement, as it turned out, is debatable. Very serious claims can be made both to the body of the Japanese sedan and to its power units. Active driving propelled by powerful motors doesn't expect outstanding durability from gearboxes either. The strong points of the Lexus GS are the suspension and steering. However, the magic of the Lexus brand is so great that many of our motorists do not pay attention to the obvious shortcomings. That is why even the oldest Lexus GS models presented in the secondary market are not cheap. If you are the owner, then be sure to leave a comment about this car. Your review will definitely help others with the choice of a car.